Hello, everybody. I'm doing chapter 8, setting culture relevant goals in the book Overcoming Unintentional Racism in Counseling and Therapy, a practitioner's guide to intentional intervention. Okay. Chapter 8 is mainly about goals and the different goals that a counselor might face when dealing with a minority client. Okay. So remember the basics that all goals must be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, right? So it has to be specific to the client, for example, measurable, right? He left this way, now he's leaving in a better, better. It has to be achievable, right? You can't set these outrageous goals in never in 100 years it's going to be, it's going to be achievable, right? It has to be relevant to the client, right? You can't say, I'm going to fix this client's eating disorder, but that's not what he doesn't have a decent disorder. So it has to be relevant to the client and time bound, right? You don't have his whole lifetime to try to fix these goals. So it has to be, in 3 months, maybe 6 months, a year. You have to talk about that to the client, right? The book really sets the tone and really in two aspects: the setting process goals and the setting outcome goals, right? So the setting process goals is establishing a working alliance, exploring the racial dynamics between counselor and client, and obtaining a counselor agreement. Okay. Then there's the outcome goals. The way, so when he's something that he needs to work on, or when he leaves, he has that part of himself, part of his psyche fixed, right? So some of these outcome goals are the resolution of memories and racial victimization, bicultural competence, and anti-racist assertion. Okay, something that you can work on. Okay. Okay. So before we talk about these goals, we need to talk about the collaboration between the client and the counselor, right? It is better for a collaboration between client and counselor when discussing goals, right? And there's barriers to this, right? A client might say, "Well, you're the professional. You should do it," or you might see the opposite of that. It is, you might see actually outright resistance, right? It says, "Well, what am I paying you for? You're the counselor. You're the professional. You should know what the goals should be, right?" And you have to explain to the client that it's better to have a collaboration, a meeting of the minds to set what the goals are for the client, right? And there's benefits to this, right? There's the client gets empowered and is able to take on or feel ownership of the counseling process when they're talking about the goals that they can be reached, right? And then the counselor cannot be successful if the client won't own the goals. So if you're telling the client the goals, there's a discrepancy, there's a gap, and you're not able to achieve that. And the client's not able to overcome that because you're telling them that this is the goal. So you have to have that discussion, that collaboration between the client and the counselor about what realistic goals are supposed to set for the client, right? Okay. The book also mentions, I have to mention it, that there's always the unstated goal, which is every counselor's first priority should achieve equitable outcomes with all clients. And this is really unstated because you're not going to be saying to the client, "Oh, and by the way, I just want you to make sure that you know that I want to achieve equitable outcomes with all my clients," right? This should go without saying, but I mean, it is stated in the book, and it should be a goal for all practitioners. Okay. So we're going to start with the process goals. Okay. The first one is establishing a working alliance. Okay. Which means it's an alignment of the client's reasonable or observing side with the counselor's working of the therapeutic side, right? So there has to be you're the client and I'm the counselor. There has to be a respect for the roles, right? So you're able to the client is able to reflect and see the quality and commitment of both the counselor, and the client's supposed to also have that commitment. Okay. The client must be able to A, observe the process, and B, trust the process, right? So he's able to, as the therapy goes on, as the counseling goes on, he's able to observe the process and how it's really helping them. And there should be trust between the client and the counselor, of course, right? The book does mention that there is usually levels of trust can be an issue of and minority clients because they don't there's a little bit of a mistrust between different cultures or different ethnic groups. Okay, so it is a counselor's job to break that barrier and be able to counsel effectively. Okay. The other process goal is exploring the racial dynamics between counselor and client. Okay. So the book, it does mention that ethnicity has been equated with sex and death as a subject that arouses deep unconscious feelings. Okay. And many minority clients enter counseling with a certain level of fear and anxiety. It is your job as a counselor to alleviate these fears and alleviate these anxieties. Okay. Sometimes if you're in a therapy session, or a group session, like Alcoholics Anonymous, they're mandated to show up to that meeting, right? They don't want to be there. They have a certain anxiety, a certain fear. And it is your job as a counselor to alleviate these symptoms by talking to them and expressing, a real professionalism and building that trust. Okay. And when appropriate, counselors should share their feelings with the minority clients. Okay, so make sure in order, like I said, that's just one of the tools that you use to connect with the clients. Okay, that's very important. And the next one is obtaining a counselor's agreement. Okay, a counselor agreement. I mean, you guys know the basics. Agreement is the practical side of aspect of counseling. Which is which time do you show up to counseling, how long the counseling is going to last, right? So the roles, that's preference number 2. Preferences for directive counseling style versus a non-directive counseling style. Expectations. What do you expect in this during the counseling? Like I said, certain level of communication, certain level of honesty, stuff like that, right? There has to be these expectations in order for the process to work. And then, like I said, there has to be goals. They have to be, you have to have that calibration of goals to say, that they're measurable and then they're achievable and so forth. Okay. Now we're talking about outcome goals. There are 3 outcome goals that have particular interest in the counselors who work with minority clients. There's resolution of racial victimization, bicultural competence, and anti-racism assertion. Okay. So just remember that if there is no culturally relevant goals to identify or achieve, move on to a more traditional approach of counseling. Okay. So you might have a minority client and he doesn't even bring up the race issue, right? It has nothing to do with race. I mean, do you touch upon it? That's your judgment. But if it's really not an issue, you might want to move on to, to talking about collaborating with goals that has nothing to do with culture or race. Okay. And let's say you do talk about to a client and about the process goals and race is brought up as a topic. Now, what do you do? Okay. Well, one of the 3 big outcome goals that you're going to be talking about are, well, the first one is resolution of memories of racial victimization. Okay. So the first one is racial victimization leaves invisible wounds that are actual trauma. Okay. The counselor must deal with the memory of the event or events of this trauma. Okay. Racial victimization distorts reality, sometimes with gross exaggeration. It connects with any problems with being about race, right? So if I had a bad day, if the client had a bad day at work, oh, it's because my boss was racist, right? Oh, I ran out of gas. Oh, because I don't have a good job because the world is racist, right? So it's always going to be going back to racism and that memory of race, right? It's going to have that victim mindset, okay? So memories lead to a reenactment of the victim role, right? You can't escape that memory, that traumatic, that trauma. It's always going to be there. So you have to help the client through it to be able to get out of that victim mindset. Okay. Client is shackled by self-doubt, fear, helplessness. When all these feelings, they lose the chance to explore their potential and they lose opportunities. So it's your chance to break these shackles of fear, doubt, and helplessness. Okay. Unresolved memories of victimization results in the denial of personal responsibility, right? So you're always going to be blaming the system of race that exists, right? So, the system puts me down and I'm helpless to act, right? They're always going to feel that that's an excuse right? And well, it's not. Yeah, you're always saying that that's legitimate feeling, and I can't move on. I'm paralyzed by it. So you have as a counselor, you have to push through it. Okay. Next one. Okay, so the next one is the outcome goal of biracial competence. Okay. Now this one's a little this one's a little tricky because because you're not really you're trying to achieve a balance between two worlds. Okay, so the book, it defines it as an internal conflict between their own communities and the dominant white society, right? So as a minority, you're living in two worlds. Okay, touches all aspects of life, right? Work, schooling, recreational, personal business, all relations, like etc. Okay, so as a you're supposed to learn to function effectively in both the majority society and their own minority communities. That's really the goal. Okay, and really there's three problems when there's conflict and biracial. There's a real competence. Okay, the first one is alienation and marginalization. Okay, this is when individuals accept the negative self-image presented by the society, and they become alienated from their own culture and do not adapt to the majority culture. Okay, so they're feeling there's certain stereotypes that they feel like they that perform against them, and it hits them directly, and as a counselor, you have to help them through that. Okay, the next one is assimilation. Assimilation, where individuals attempt to be part of a dominant culture and do not maintain their ties with their ethnic culture, right? So this is they're going one way all the way to the dominant culture, to the white society, right? And they try to forget about their roots and their past. Okay, and this actually causes, like I said, this actually causes internal problems, mental problems as well. Okay, and then they go on the other side is withdrawal of separation. This is where individuals emphasize their ethnic culture and withdraw from contact with a dominant group. Okay, so this is on the other side, right? So they don't like the white society. They don't want to deal with it. So they get stuck with their, not stuck, but they prefer or they only go to their ethnic culture. They stay there. They talk with their own with the immediate family, the only food, and they don't go out. Right? They isolate themselves. Okay. At the end of the day, bicultural competence is necessary to the adjustments or survival of most minority groups in the United States. Okay, so this is really a minority issue. Okay, so as a counselor or as a therapist, and you have to be aware, and if these one of these three topics are a problem, then you have to help the client find that balance. Okay. The next one is the anti-racial assertion. Okay, this is the third goal that that a client might want to meet. Okay, here assertion refers to the use and behavior of protecting one's own rights without interfering with the rights of others. Okay, so here pretty much assertion means assertiveness. Okay, so in order to have that assertion or to be assertive, you have to have the refusal to acquiesce with the request of others. So you can't be a yes man all the time, right? You have to be able to say no. Okay, you have to be able to express your opinions and feelings, and not just hear the opinions and feelings of others, right? You can't be staying silent. You're able. You actually push. You actually participate. Okay. And C, expressions of one's own requests, right? So you just don't become a yes man, like I said, take a request and stuff, and it's a one-way street. No, you actually have to express you have your own demands, your own requests on society, right? Okay, so that's those are the examples that are given in the book. Okay, this just that talks about a theory that if you're being assertive, then it takes away from anxiety, or you can't feel anxious. I don't know if that's true, but I mean, it does. I think it does alleviate a lot of the anxiety. If you're just staying silent and taking it, then that in itself is a problem. Okay. Make sure your assertion is not the same as aggression, but at the same, like I said, as long as you're not interfering with the rights of others, you're okay. But from the outside, it might look like you're aggressive, right? But no, you're assertive, right? you're expressing your opinions, you're expressing your feelings, right? You're not being a yes man to other people's requests, or or just staying silent. Okay. And then they talk about role play as an example of behavioral rehearsal given in text, right? So they're able to practice this assertion. You as a client say, what are you going to say in this situation, right? It talks about or gives an example in the chapter about an Asian American, getting help from a counselor and being assertive, right? So the counselor says, let me model for you what you say, and then you can practice it on me. Okay. I refuse to accept your disrespectful comments anymore. If you cannot appreciate differences in people, then you have a problem. If you don't stop it, I'll report you to the administration. Okay. So that's something somebody of a minority would say, right? If somebody's being vile, or somebody's being rude or disrespectful in terms of race. Okay. And that's pretty much what the chapter talks about in terms of goals for clients of minority, something to watch out for. Okay. That's the end of presentation. My name is Felipe Bravo, and thank you guys for your time.